Welcome. You're listening to the Good Girls Don't podcast with Ashleigh Rae
and Verity Mansfield.
This is the podcast where we smash those rules that we've been taught to follow both as men and women and burn the damn rule book. We're tackling the big issues and the issues nobody wants to talk about, and we'll be fiercely feminist about it.
This podcast is about inspiration, education, compassion, and being the change that you need to see in this world. This podcast is for the trailblazers, the freedom fighters, and the soul igniters, and all the women just like you who are ready to break the good girl rules and be heard.
We acknowledge the traditional custodians of Australia and its First Nations people on which this podcast is produced and consumed. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging.
Get ready for the revolution. It's coming to you now. It's coming to you now. We're gonna sing an evolution. And they'll never bring us down. No, they'll never bring us down.
Hey there everyone, it's Ashleigh. And yes, it's me, just me this time. What you're about to hear is a special interview recorded by Nicol Heard from the Bestie and Courageous You and myself for International Women's Day on the power of curiosity. And really, it's a little bit of an insight into how Good Girls Don't podcast came to be. And I'm really thrilled to share this with you. Check the show notes if you want to connect with Nicol. I'm really excited to share this with you because it's not often that Verity and I are on the other side of the microphone. Have an amazing day or night wherever you are in the world.
Hi, amazing biz besties, and thank you for joining us at the next session. I am joined by the amazing Ashleigh Rae, and my description of her superpower is that she's fearless, and she's fearless in that you may have seen her speaking about her feminism, but she's also fearless in her own life, and is fearlessly will stand up for things that often aren't talked about or should be talked about, and even fearless about her own health and looking after herself, which is a really important thing as a woman to do. So welcome, Ashleigh. Please share with us what your superpower is and a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much for that really lovely introduction. I'm going to take that and I'm going to have to quote it somewhere and frame it and put it somewhere I see it every day for that now. My superpower is curiosity, but before I dive into that, I'll tell you a bit about who I am and sort of how that all knits together. So I'm Ashleigh. I love coffee, specifically Nescafe Blend 43 is my jam. Or if I'm out, it's a hazelnut latte because they're delicious. I'm in Melbourne and I really love podcasts. I absolutely adore them. I work on them a lot. I am a co-host of Good Girls Don't podcast, which is all about feminism. I'm also quite outspoken in terms of feminism, and that is a bit where the curiosity comes in. Well, it's a lot where the curiosity comes in, because for me it started with just having questions about why things were the way they were, and I didn't understand it because it seemed extremely inefficient and ineffective.
I will tag in the comments actually a story that you put about your curiosity and making feminist.
One of my first questions.
Yeah, positively did earlier this week because it's a really fun story to listen to. Sorry, I interrupted, but I just want everybody to go back and listen to the story because it was,
Oh yeah,
female bum slapping and farting, which is just insane when you think of feminism. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's totally fine, because I used to have the earliest questions I always had were at school and we were being taught things, and I was like, but where are the women in this? I look around, my life growing up, I was surrounded by women, and I saw that, like, you know, they had to deal with their periods every month, and the, you know, different gender roles, because I grew up in the 90s, so it was still very much women do this and men do that. And I just had questions, because I'd go to school and we'd learn about these great men, like we'd learn about Captain Cook, and we would learn about Macquarie and Philip, and I'd be like, so did they have women in the colonies? Did women exist? What about the Aboriginal women? And how did they manage things like this is before the bra was invented. How did women survive without a bra? Were they allowed out of the house? Like, I just had all of these questions and I never had them answered.
And for active-breasted women, this bra question is important.
Exactly my point, yes, because I'm not a small-breasted woman either. So I had all these really big questions and they were never answered. It's only as an adult where I've been able to, like, thank God for Google and YouTube and podcasts in particular, where I can take that deep dive and really kind of answer those questions that I've had from when I was a kid. And it's really led me to unravel a lot of, I don't want to sound like a militant feminist, that's not my thing, but it's really led me to unravel what patriarchy is and how it shows up in my life, and also how it shows up in business. And it really makes me think that there are so many things that we don't talk about that we really need to. They're necessary for our health and well-being. If we want to progress as a society, they're absolutely necessary. We should be talking about things more openly with each other, because really the reason we don't talk about it is shame and, you know, social conditioning.
I've got it, and I've just had an aha moment with growing up. So my mother and grandmother brought me up. So I was raised by strong women. And when you said in the 1990s there was still women should do this and men should do that, I wasn't raised that way. I was raised that women can do everything. So it's never actually occurred to me until you said that has happened. And it's really interesting. And we've been talking in all the other episodes about my life, and reality is different to yours. So it's quite interesting when you do listen to something with curiosity, what else you hear, isn't it?
Yes, and that's what I love, is hearing other people's stories, because just because your story is different to mine doesn't mean that there aren't things that we find common ground on. And one of the things I love about curiosity is it leads you to asking questions. And look, I do this a lot in Facebook groups because I'm really curious to know, what are other people's experiences with something? Am I the only one who thinks this way or feels this way, or are there others? Is there like a whole group of us that we just don't know about? Do we need to get jackets? And I really noticed that there seems to be like two camps of people. So there's people who come at a question and they're very scared, they're very frightened, they don't like what I've said, that's fine. And then there's people who are willing to have a discussion and explore that and, you know, sort of nut it out with me. And I think with curiosity, we've got to accept as well that there's going to be people who don't like us for rocking the boat, who don't like that we're asking nosy, pointy questions that, you know, some of the questions do hit on people's pain points and hit us right in the shame hole, like, and it's not nice. It's uncomfortable. And part of curiosity is uncomfortable and sitting in that and being willing to unravel that and look at it and see it in all of its ugliness and all of its glory as well.
And with, you know, we know that the UN version of International Women's Day is generational equality, which is about equal pay but also equal education. And I think as women we do need to be curious, and when we need to remove the judgment of being curious. So if we have a response, why are we responding that way, you know, or why do we have this burning question? It's really important that we remove judgment and support each other. If there's stuff, Ash, that you've said that I'm like, yeah, I don't know whether I agree with that, but that's obviously because of our, you know, that I've been brought up by women and it has never occurred to me. But it's about learning what we can learn, not judging what somebody else is saying. It's like, well, what if we listen to that further? What can we take from it?
Exactly. It's a lot of it is just being willing to sit down and have a conversation, whether that's in a group thread or face-to-face or over Zoom. just because you don't agree doesn't mean you can't have an amazing discussion and really chew over an issue with someone, and you walk away with it with maybe a whole new dimension to your understanding of it. You still might not agree with it, but it may just open your mind up in a different way. You might consider a different perspective. A good example of this, and my partner will not like that I've said this, is that he and I really don't agree on a lot of things when it comes to feminism, and I don't agree with a lot of the viewpoints that his family hold when it comes to politics. My father-in-law doesn't believe the pay gap exists. My dad really is a bit old-fashioned and thinks that women belong in the kitchen. But we can still, talk about it and, crack some jokes and sort of break the ice a little bit. And my partner especially, we debate about it all the time. Healthy debate is really good for expanding your understanding. And I think it also helps you to construct your arguments or rebuttals like really creatively and really succinctly. And that's not a bad skill to take with you throughout life. That's actually a really handy thing to have.
And I think as women, we haven't always been heard. So it's really nice to actually feel heard. And when you feel heard, you're quite often open to hearing other people's viewpoints because you're not shutting down that you're not being heard, so you're not going to listen either.
Exactly. And a lot of the time it does lead to, there's like the surface level issues, like there's, the stuff that's really not that important, but it's the stuff that comes up immediately. And it's usually born out of defensiveness and also a lot of social conditioning. So you'll find that it's like the knee-jerk reaction that people have. But, my partner and I just literally had like a week-long argument with each other about an issue within feminism. It was about violence against women. And once we nutted down, once we got through all of the knee-jerk reactions to each other, it turned out that we were, it was actually something else that we really needed to talk about.
Yeah.
Instead. And that, sometimes you've got to go through like, okay, get that stuff off the table, put it out there, like word vomit that out. Then everyone agrees to shunt that to the side because it's just not useful or helpful. And let's get to the real meat of the issue. Let's get to the real thing at the center of this.
So with feminism, Ash, and your curiosity around it, how do we embody that and align it with our own beliefs, and how do we move forward without cutting down each other? Because I do think as women we are often our worst enemies because we're only learning now to support each other and hold each other up, where we've come from a mentality of playground mentality of picking on each other and judging each other. So how do we do we come from a positive place of empowering each other and not actually putting judgment on it, but we learn, be curious and keep rising up?
Yeah, I think you just made a really excellent point that this is, even though women, this is very broadly speaking, I think we have a real innate nature to support each other. That's been really suppressed and sort of squashed down for so long that it feels very unnatural for us to do it. Like it's like something we have to relearn to do.
But naturally we are nurturers, aren't we?
Yeah, and I find, so many of us, we are, and we do want to see each other succeed. We want to see more women doing extraordinary things. I was at the movies yesterday and I saw 3 previews for 3 feminist films that, a year ago or 5 years ago, never would have been made. Ever. Like it would just be a pipe dream. And I'm really, really excited because one of them is directly about a political movement done by women. So anywho, I'm getting off track, but embodying it is going to look different for everybody. And this is the thing, feminism is going to be different for everyone. We can't save the world ourselves. We can make our own contribution. We can't champion everything because we will burn out and basically explode because there's so much. So we have to sort of pick our battles. And I know that sounds a little bit like maybe for some people that might sound a bit like, oh, well, that's not exciting. But pick the things that you can continue to do throughout your life, and it will change and evolve as you grow, obviously, same as your business if you have one. And it is asking questions. It's asking questions like, whose voices aren't being heard right now? If you particularly are a Caucasian person, whose voices are not being heard in your space? It's questioning everything. And when I say everything, it's like, well, okay, when we're talking about business, am I assuming that all of my customers look like me, that all of my audience looks like me, or do I have other people that I'm just not including in my marketing? It's asking those questions and observing what your response is. Some of us, it's going to be something that is a really long road to uncovering and unraveling, and genuinely speaking, it's going to be lifelong overall, but this beginning bit can feel a bit tough. You need to have enormous compassion for yourself while you go through it, while you figure it out. Your viewpoint's going to be really different to mine. How you do things is going to be really different to mine, and that's okay. You do your bit of feminism and activism over here, I will do mine. It's going to all contribute to the same tidal wave. Oh.
Because so to me, I prefer to use the word equality, and because it's really important to me, because I have a son and a daughter, and I have raised them to make sure that they believe in each other and that they're equal beings, and that they treat, my son treats females equally and my daughter treats males equally. So how do we, I guess, navigate feminism and equality and compassion together to make sure that our voices are being heard, for that we are moving forward together, not necessarily, and I'm not naive enough to think that there's not pay gaps, because there's huge pay gaps, and we have a while to go for health and safety and education. An example of it, my daughter's quite clever, and 3 years ago we went to a VCE, which is Victorian Year 11 and 12, for those people who don't know, in Australia. And we went to it, and my daughter went up to buy physics, all of the science subjects, and math science and subjects, and the man said, oh no, you don't need those. And this was 3 years ago. And she said, sorry, she's like, oh no, they're the subjects the males do.
Wow, okay.
This was somebody selling the BSS book, and we're like, beg your pardon? And he's like, and I'm like, no, well, she's already doing, she's actually 12, like Haley was a year ahead. So she was actually doing, when she's doing year 10, she was doing year 11 subjects. And they were, these 6 subjects that apparently he flat out said to my daughter and I that women don't do. So I'm not naive enough to think that we don't do it. And generation equality is really there. It is still there today. But it's in the feminism movement, I get concerned that my son's going to be knocked down as well when he's not the cause or the problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I hear that argument a lot from mums. I hear that viewpoint a lot, and my partner has that as well. He's like, hang on, I personally did not oppress you and do all the horrible things that men have done over the centuries. Like I know you didn't. That's fine. I get that. I think it is understanding what feminism means to you individually and defining that. For me, I go by, it's the social and political and economic equality of the sexes, or, insert genders, whatever you want to call that aspect. That's my definition. It's very succinct, it's very short, and it also encompasses a lot. But understanding what that means for you, because it's going to be a little bit different. And there are a lot of ideas around what feminism is and is not. It is understanding what it means. And for the men listening and for the young boys listening and the mums, I want to say patriarchy doesn't work for guys either. And there's a lot for guys to unpack around the social expectations we really put them under, and we really push on them. it's understanding what it means for them as well, and coming together and having those discussions with our close friends and family, the people that we can have those conversations with. You're going to need to have really strong boundaries about who you do and do not engage with online and in person. There are some subject matters that you absolutely can't go to because it's going to mess with your mental health, and that's completely okay. We recently did a podcast episode on female genital mutilation. My partner couldn't handle it. It was too much for him, but he can do stuff and look at other topics like the pay gap. That is easier for him to do and not as traumatic for him to participate in. It's okay. You've got to know where your boundaries are. There are some people that are going to be in your life that you absolutely can't have those conversations with for one reason or another. That's fine. You don't have to have those conversations with them, but find those people that you can, where it's safe for you to have those discussions, where judgment is not a thing, where you can explore an issue together. It's not always an easy process, because it does mean confronting things that you've probably held quite close to you and thought were normal for most of your life. And to suddenly sort of have that rocked can feel very disconcerting and very uncomfortable. So have oodles and oodles of hardcore self-care as well.
My son's got it all worked out. He is going to do his course and then let his sister provide for him, because she's going to have all the money and stuff. He's got it all worked out. But it really does come down to that we don't make other people feel less than while we're empowering ourselves. If they're not responsible for the action that has disempowered us. Mine is what? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think there's also a huge element of education that needs to happen for everybody. So one thing that I bump up against a lot is people say, look, it wasn't my fault personally. This is an argument I get from my partner all the time. Hey, I didn't put women in chains. I didn't force you to be here and all that sort of stuff. No, but we do have to understand the history. We have to know where we've come from. We've got to understand what's happened in the past that has brought us here today so that we can move forward in a different way. It's not to assign blame and pain and shame to men right now.
Yeah.
That's not the case. And I think a lot of men think that, or a lot of people think that, you know, for me, this is not true, but there's a system out there that sort of believes that, you know, all men are to blame and they're horrible and awful and they are personally responsible today for what happened 200 years ago. And it's just not true. But we do have to understand that we participate in a system that is oppressive to a lot of people and empowers a certain type of person. So there's a lot of education that needs to happen around things. And I often think feminism is also not just about equality between the sexes. It's also about asking for our basic needs to be met. So basic needs as in the right to vote, which wasn't always a given for women or for people of colour.
And it's been in the last, 1960s, I think. Did we get the vote, or 50s? It hasn't. That is what infuriating to me when people say, I don't want to vote, and I don't care who you vote for. It's not my business. But it infuriates me when women don't own the right to vote, because people fought damn hard for us to do that.
Well, yeah, people died. I mean, if we look at the suffragette movement that happened in the UK, you have women literally committing acts of domestic terrorism in order to get the vote. They blew things up. They blew up post boxes. They blew up buildings. They went to jail and were tortured for the right to vote. And even then, the right to vote was only given to women who owned property and were over a certain age. So it was only a really small population of women who were given that. Australia's actually got an amazing history of being really progressive in a lot of ways. So like we start off with people of all walks of life doing incredible things, but then we get a like sort of very patriarchal system that comes in and quite literally whitewashes everything. One of our major banks was founded by a trans woman. And I cannot for the life of me remember if it's St. George or Macquarie. It's one of those two that was founded by a trans woman who also owned a bunch of brothels in Sydney.
Which, because we're going to have to close up shortly because we're nearly at our time. But I guess when you're talking about education and learning about oppression, and I'm going to take you back to, please go and find the story of this Bestie that Ash has shared, because it's not all about oppression either. There are stories that, if you go and get educated, are about empowerment and women learning to stand up for themselves and embracing themselves and loving who they are. There are positive stories that we can take from going through the education system and learning about feminism as well.
Absolutely. There's so many stories, and the one that you're talking about is my favorite, and I think about it every time I'm having like a bad day and I've like got a troll or just the internet is a bad place to be. And it just makes you happy.
And it put a new lens on feminism for me, to be honest, Ash. Like, it was a really good story to go, how, and being in Australia, like an Australian story, it's really fun, it's positive, and it's like, yeah, hey, I'm proud of those women, because of the fun and what they did. And it wasn't fun for them. I'm grateful for that. I can appreciate it now, because it wouldn't have been fun for them at all. Actually, if people want to continue the conversation with you, where do they find you?
Yeah, sure. So I'm co-host of the Good Girls Don't podcast. So you can find us on Facebook or Instagram at Good Girls Don't Pod, or you can just find my website, which is ashleighrae.com.au. I've also got another business page, which is at Evoke Media. So you can find me there.
Beautiful. I will pop in Ash's Facebook page for you to follow. But please, if you have any questions for Ashleigh, or you would like to, or you're curious about what we've said today, please continue the conversation in the comments, and Ash will be only too happy to join in. I love having conversations with you, Ashleigh. You and I have had lots of conversations about that. We both have PTSD, which is a whole other hour on itself of how to live with that.
Easily.
Yeah, and this conversation will keep going. But thank you for joining us. And everybody, I'm looking forward to the next session. See you then.
Thank you.
Get ready for the revolution. It's coming to you now. It's coming to you now.